Shane, can we get that woo-hoo for the intro tomorrow?
No.
Please, just that part. Please? No. You like to play the Shohei Ohtani home run call from Japan.
Yeah, but that wasn't, no. Unless our guest would like it.
I'm sure he would. Scott Richey joins the show now. Illinois men's basketball and football for the News Gazette at SR Richey on Twitter. Scott, good morning.
Morning, guys.
Hey, thanks for taking some time with us this morning. We've been doing a schedule breakdown for just Nebraska football all the way up until now when we got to Illinois, so we're happy that you chose to take a little stop with us here. After assessing the team, obviously it looks different. No Ryan Walters on defense this year. You had an internal hire, and Aaron Henry step up to take over the first in the nation in takeaways team, the first in interceptions, third in total defense, and so forth. And I think the question on everybody's mind is, can he replicate what we saw out of Illinois last year with Ryan Walters?
That is the question, and it's a tough task considering just how good the Illinois defense was a year ago. To be considered, one of the best, if not the best defense, especially when it came to the scoring defense in the country, like repeating that is tricky. But I think they can still be really good on that side of the ball. Aaron Henry, worked hand in hand with Ryan Walters in the secondary, developing that group that just had, 4 of the 5 mostly, wind up on an NFL roster, 3 being drafted, 1 Devin Witherspoon, going, in the top 10 to the Seahawks. So I think it was the no-brainer move for Brett Bielema just to stay in-house and move Aaron Henry up. And obviously Brett Bielema, his experience comes on the defensive side of the ball. He had his fingerprints all over, what Ryan Walters executed the last 2 years. So they'll still be good. It'll be different. The secondary goes from super experienced, super productive to pretty young across the board. But, the strength, I think, flips up front where they got Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph to return inside, plus Seth Coleman and Gabe Akis, on the outside providing pressure. So it'll, I think, take a little bit of a different approach, perhaps, maybe more oriented up front, but still, I think, should be a pretty good defense.
Looking at that back end and who they've got to replace, obviously Tavion Nicholson, probably the primary corner this year. Some of the other guys, whether it's Tyler Strain, Matthew Bailey, Demetrius Hill, what are some of those guys you're looking at to step up, and how do you think they'll do in terms of who they've got available and who they've got to replace?
Yeah, so Taz Nicholson is like the one probably guaranteed starter at one of the cornerback spots. He had a pretty good season last year. Got hurt at the end, broke his wrist. He missed a couple games at the end of the year, including the bowl game. But he was healthy this spring, got back to it, and he's the veteran now of that group. But Matthew Bailey, as a true freshman last year, really stood out. Like, he was unheralded as a recruit could get, really. One of the last additions to the class. It didn't really have, any other FBS offers to speak of. But, not only does he, kind of look like he could have been one of the Brown siblings, and kind of sounds like Chase and Sidney Brown, but like he plays a little bit like Sidney Brown at safety. So I think they're really, counting on a really good sophomore season from him. Then I think the kind of the wild card is the guy you mentioned, Demetrius Hill, was a freshman All-American at Florida International last year. Put up good numbers, has good size, and I think fits exactly what Illinois wants in it's secondary. So I'm curious to see what he can do in the Big Ten. Whether he can kind of parlay his success at FIU into at least that, or maybe more with the Illini. But then the other spots are up for grabs. There's going to be a lot of young guys, a lot of competition, I think, this fall to kind of see who winds up in those spots.
Scott, strength is on the lines. Offensive line returns 3 starters. Your D line, of course, gets second team All-American Jerzan Newton back. What position group would you say, though, isn't as top-notch in your eyes? Not that the alarm bells are going off, but one can be boom or bust.
I think it's probably on the offensive side, and it's either quarterback or running back, because Illinois has to replace both. Tommy DeVito sort of parachuted in for one season and brought an incredible amount of swagger and confidence and production to that spot. And obviously Chase Brown was, Doak Walker finalist, one of the top running backs in the country, and heavily used, last year. So they brought in 2 transfer quarterbacks, Luke Altmaier from Ole Miss, John Paddock from Ball State. Luke Altmaier is the starter. Brett Bielema won't say it, so I'll go ahead and do it. But Luke's the starter. But John is, in his 5th year, was a starter all last season at Ball State. Has the experience. If things go awry, you've got a guy that's not going to be flustered that you can throw in there. But Luke Altmaier, he's the starter, and played pretty well this spring. For the limited amount that we actually got to see him. Running back, it's not exactly a toss-up. A healthy Reggie Love will be important. Healthy Josh McCray certainly will be important because he wasn't really at all last year. Those are probably the top 2 guys, and different style backs. Reggie Love a little more Chase Brown-ish. Haven't had that potential, haven't seen it fully realized yet. Josh McCray obviously fits into the bigger back category that Brett Bielema certainly seems to like. Those are your top 2, and then the Aiden Lawfrey, who's more their speed back, and then Jordan Anderson, both those are redshirt freshmen. And then Caden Fagan, who's a local area kid, 4-star recruit, true freshman, enrolled early. He also just a really large human being to be a running back like Jordan Anderson and Josh McCray. It's kind of like 5 guys for 3 spots. I doubt we'll see Chase Brown level usage where he got essentially 90% of the carries last year. So I think it'll be more of a mix, and then we'll see. But those are, I think, probably the 2 biggest question marks because they're moving on from the 2 guys that were awfully productive, and we'll see what they can do there. And because it's important, obviously. Those are 2 guys that touch the ball a lot.
Scott, I want to ask you about expectations this season for Illinois. Historically, they've had trouble stacking quality seasons up on one another, going all the way back to the Kirk Kittner era. What is expected around Champaign right now in terms of how this team should perform? And is there any, I guess, hesitation or caution because of the fact that historically Illinois has had a little bit of trouble stringing good seasons together?
Yeah, I think there's a mix of some anticipation of what could be coming off the best season of Illinois football in 15 years, with, combined with this idea, some Illinois fans is like, it's Illinois football that can't really be trusted sometimes. But I think baseline is get back to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
Consecutive bowl games are super rare in program history. So just, even if it's, going 6-6, just get to a bowl game.
Mm-hmm.
But that's bottom level expectation. The schedule, on one hand, it looks like it sets up pretty easily, and maybe not easily. I don't think anything's ever easy, but sets up nicely. How about that? For Illinois? But then you look at the non-conference schedule. Toledo brings back a ton. Is really good, MAC program. Kansas is on the upswing. Florida Atlantic. They've got a new coach, but Tom Herman hasn't forgotten what he knows about football, and he's been successful. So it's a little tricky. And then I think the Big Ten West is as open as it has ever been, and this will be the final year. I think everyone in the West, except for Northwestern, obviously, has a feeling that they can win it. So, that would be huge for Illinois. It's never won a division title since Big Ten went that route. So to snatch one on the last year that divisions exist would be a kind of need for them. But I think just continuing to advance the program in the right direction under Brett Bielema, like that's the goal. Like he said when he was hired, like he wants to build Illinois into a consistent winner, which is something that really hasn't been the case for the program. So there's been progress in year 1 and year 2, and we'll see if they can keep it going in year 3.
Scott, we appreciate your time this morning. Thanks so much. We'll talk again once the game gets closer.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It's Scott Richey, Illinois men's basketball and football for the News Gazette at SR Richey on Twitter. Before we send you home, let's tell you who's back in action tonight.
Who is it?
The Omaha Storm Chasers. Turn that hat around. Let people know. Come on, Robbie. Yeah. That baby blue is sick, by the way. You won't get that hat as a giveaway, but you could find that hat in their team store, and you can be just like Robbie. Put a headset on, and you're an honorary member of Coffee and Cream.
I'd rock that hat.
That hat is sick. They have the St. Paul Saints all this week. Tons of great promotions throughout the week as well. And then, of course, Thursday's the day that everybody likes to be at the ballpark because it's $2 deal day.
That's right.
It's $2 dogs and $2 beers. We appreciate your time this morning. We will see you tomorrow.